This week's notice of claim against Hacienda Healthcare has raised new questions about just what happened at the clinic before an incapacitated woman gave birth in December.
Did the healthcare center go against the family's wishes to provide only female staff to care for the woman, or is there more to the story? Today, the care center is defending itself against that accusation. Joe Dana has a new response from the clinic. Joe?
The former nurse arrested for allegedly raping and impregnating a helpless patient worked more than 800 overnight shifts with the woman, according to the notice of claim. Now, the claim lays out an argument that Nathan Sutherland's assignment to care for the woman was in violation of requests and orders. One exhibit shows a form filled out by the woman's mother, which specifically requests female staff only. However, that request does not pertain to doctors or nurses. Instead, it relates to personal care, such as help with dressing, bathing, and toileting. That's a key detail. In other words, as a spokesperson for Hacienda tells us today, having a male nurse care for the woman was not unusual, that there are male nurses, male doctors, and male respiratory therapists. Many people at the clinic would have known there were men caring for this patient. Now, we spoke with two other former administrators of Hacienda who also acknowledged this was the case. They say the term caretaker was understood not to include licensed professional doctors and nurses. Though one former employee questioned whether Hacienda staff should have done more to limit how often the suspect was alone with the patient. Hacienda tells us today the current CEO of the company, while filling a different role when the alleged assaults took place, did everything in his power to ensure the individual support plan was carried out, and that non-licensed staff members, who were men, were not allowed to work one-on-one with the patient. Now, whether or not Hacienda managers were negligent will be a key piece of any lawsuits. Since this scandal broke, Hacienda has been overhauling its policies and patient protocols. The state is enforcing stricter oversight as well, including unannounced site inspections. Joe Dana, 12 News.
All right, Joe.